So then I filmed the sequence that takes place right after the workout sequence. That was the next thing that I shot. There was a gap in between those two, and it was a point where I wasn't sure if I was going to continue. I had filmed a decent amount, and there was a good chunk of the film that was done, but I didn't know if I had a good ending yet. I didn't know where exactly I was going to take it, and then I got a haircut. And at first I was like, oh, I might have to scrap the film now because that's gonna mess with the continuity, or I have to wait, a month or so to like let my hair grow out. And then I was like, what if I just used that? What if I just took that and made that into something? And I was like, okay, first off, I can't really show myself actually cutting my hair because first off, I don't know how to cut my own hair, and second off, I'd already cut it, so that was kind of out of the picture. So I had to find kind of a creative way to show that without showing it, and I think it came across pretty well. And for that scene, all of the lighting was set up by me. I didn't use any of the actual lights that were in my room. I set up lighting for that sequence, and I think it just looks a little bit better because there was the opening sequence where I was getting ready, and then there was this sequence in the bathroom, which granted one was at day, one was at night, but with this sequence, because I actually set up the lighting myself, it just looked a little bit nicer than what was already there. And then obviously, as I leave that area, and then I come and sit on the bed, you get that orange, very, very warm light that was mostly inspired by just the natural lighting that I usually have in my room, because I have that LED strip behind that bookcase, and I have it set to orange usually. And I also felt like it connected it to that desert dream sequence, and it kind of gave like I don't want to say like an origin, but you know how a lot of your dreams connect some way to your life? I felt like the color scheme of something, in his real life connecting to the dream made a lot of sense. And that was part of the idea behind that. And then a big thing when I was filming this with that text message is I didn't know who that was going to initially. I wanted him to reach out, I wanted him to kind of put himself out there, but I didn't know who was going to be on the other end of that text until later. And this was another point in the movie where I was like, am I going to continue? Am I going to finish this? Now, granted, this was one of the sequences that very much like pushed me over the edge because I was like, this sequence is too good to not show people, so I need to finish this out and I need to finish the story. After filming all of that, I finally got the idea for what the desert sequence was going to be, and I planned that out, and I kind of knew I was going to need help with this one, so I contacted my dad, and he was more than willing to drive me out to the middle of nowhere to film another thing in the desert. I know I've filmed so much stuff in the desert, but it's just, especially for this film, it really had a good meaning behind it. The idea of him going from this very beautiful, lush, tranquil garden to barren wasteland, nothing, was really powerful, and I felt like the desert was the perfect location for those sequences. Now, those sequences obviously had their own challenge with the fact that I'm interacting with myself, and that was the thing that I had to figure out beforehand. I had to really previs that and see what could I get away with? How could I interact with myself, and what could I do realistically that would look visually good and that wouldn't be stretching myself too far to the point where it wouldn't look good, it would look goofy or something. That's when I came up with the idea of, okay, it's one punch, he gets knocked down, and then kicks him when he's down. And those two actions, I was like, I can do that believably, and it can look really good, and the effects aren't going to be so far out of my reach that it's going to look bad and it's going to detract from the story. What ended up happening is we had to film a lot of shots twice because I had to do the first shot with the white shirt on, and then get up, try and make as few footprints as possible, which that was one nice thing while we were filming it. The ground was pretty wet, so it was very packed, very dense, and so the sand wasn't moving around a lot, so the footsteps weren't as big of an issue. So then I would, I'd run off screen, switch shirts, come back, film the second shot, and try and hope that I didn't kind of cross over or the shadows didn't cross. It got really close for a couple of shots where the shadows almost crossed, which would have meant editing that together, and I will talk about that more in the editing portion of this video, but luckily that didn't happen. And for the most part, those scenes went very smoothly. The weather was perfect on those days, and it was just a good, smooth shoot. There were a few shots that were a little difficult, and that was more me being a little bit of a perfectionist for sure. The two shots in particular were the footsteps. I really wanted a tracking shot of the footsteps going forward, but we didn't have a gimbal, so my dad was handhelding it. And the biggest issue was we realized if he's holding it and he's walking, like in theory, if I'm walking towards him and he's walking away from me, he could just hold the camera and then do that. But we realized, oh wait, he's going to leave footprints. And then as soon as I walk, you're going to see his footprints. That's going to be a problem. So he's got to stand off to the side and then hold the camera out like this and like low to the ground so it's like at my feet, and then walk with it like really awkwardly. And so that shot we just did like 5 times, and then I was like, surely one of these is good. I don't need too much of it. It's not a super long shot, and because it's filmed in slow motion and I can stabilize the shot afterwards, I can fix it up if I need to. But really, that was a shot where it's just like film a few takes, and just make sure you're gonna have something that's usable at the very least. And then the same thing went for the shot where I punched, and you see like the fist and there's the lens flare. We filmed that shot multiple times because that was one where it was like I had an idea, like a very specific idea of what I wanted it to look like, and it was one of those like on the day I was like, it just felt off, and it felt like couldn't quite get exactly what I wanted. And so that was another one where we just filmed it a bunch of times, and I was like, I'm sure one of these looks good. And sure enough, when I got to the editing room and I was looking at it there, I was like, yes, okay, this take looks the best, and this is actually the closest to what I wanted. But on set, it was kind of weird because I felt like I wasn't getting exactly what I wanted, but in the end, it worked out. Again, just film extra shots. If you're not sure, just film an extra take. It's fine. After filming those desert sequences, there was some time in between then and filming the final sequence. This is when I actually filmed the scene where I rip up the note, and also the scene where I put the pieces of the note back in the little box. And this was very much like an afterthought type scene where I was like, oh, this is an interesting idea that I have, and I wasn't sure if it was going to be in the movie. The main reason was I didn't know if I wanted the note that the kid received to be seen. I didn't know if that was one of those things that's better left just up to the viewer's imagination, or if I should show that. I filmed the scene because I figured there's no harm in filming it and editing it and seeing what I can create. And after I filmed it, I was like, this is a beautiful scene. And those two scenes, the one where I rip it up and the one where I put the pieces back, are two of my favorite from the whole movie. Mainly the second one because of the quiet in it and the tenderness of it, where it's this very, I don't want to say lonely because a lot of the movie is kind of that lonely feeling, but it's just a quiet moment on a quiet morning where you've kind of let out a lot of emotion, and now you're kind of reset and you're back to reality in a way. And I will talk about that a little bit more in the editing video as well, because of some of the sound design they did for that scene that I felt like was really nice. And then for the scene where I rip it up, that was one where when I edited it together, I was like, this is a really fun scene, and I like the energy of the scene and how it blends with the music. And that was a big reason as to why I kept it in, because I was like, this scene is just edited super fun and super well, and I think it just came together perfectly. And so it's like, I have to keep this in. And so it was kind of one of those things where it's like, I don't totally love that I'm going to show what the note says, but at the same time, I think it's done in a really good way, so I should keep it in. And then this led to the final sequence with that last song. And this one was the most logistically difficult. It was filmed over multiple days. There was a lot of different things going on. The stuff with my dog, that was impromptu. There was no idea that would be in the movie, but on the day of filming, I was like, this just feels right. This got to be in the movie. It's got to be included. There's a couple shots of driving when I first start driving out. Those were fun to film, but also annoying because there was a lot of complications with obviously filming a car driving scene by yourself. I basically just got a smaller tripod that I could fit in the car and then bungee corded it to the seats. But it's one of those where you kind of have to do a loop. You got to drive around, and then you got to stop, and then you got to watch the shot back and make sure it looks good. And there were times where it was overexposed, or the camera got bumped a little bit, so the angle was off, and that really annoyed me. So that was a difficult sequence to film. And then with the part with my mom, it was the same day that I had filmed the stuff with my dad, and I didn't tell her beforehand. I probably should have done that. I probably should have called her and been like, "Hey, I want to film this thing, and I need you and I need you to be in it, and that would be really cool if you were in it." But again, I kind of figured my mom would be fine with it, and luckily she was. Luckily she was super cool about it, and we filmed that sequence, and that one was really fun. And then the one with Caden, that one I knew ahead of time, and I called them and I was like, "Hey, can I use your rooftop? Because I really want to film something on the rooftop of your house. It's got a really good view." And he's like, "Yeah, it's no problem." And so then we went and filmed that. And for all of those sequences, nothing that we're saying connects to the story. It was just talking, because that was a scene that I knew the dialogue wasn't gonna matter. What was gonna matter was the blocking and the composition of the scene. Those were the two things that were going to tell the story. I had a lot of fun with when blocking the scenes, because they each have their own unique thing. I really wanted it to represent three relationships: a son and a father, a son and a mother, and two friends. And what does that look like, when you're just looking at body language and you're just looking at how those people would talk to each other and how those people will show love for each other? With me and my dad, I can't explain specifically why the blocking on that scene, by having us face the same direction, by having us not really looking at each other but just looking off in the distance, felt right. But it did. It just felt like two guys just talking, and two people just naturally just being. I don't know. There's not an explanation behind it. It just felt right, to be honest with you. With my mom, that one was very specific. I wanted to kind of start with this distance between the two people, and how sometimes with your parents you can have that distance between them, and you can not be fully opened up yet, or you can feel like you are not being heard yet. And then I wanted that distance to be closed, and kind of have this transition between, I don't know if I'm getting through to this person, I don't know if we're connecting here, and then it's like that reassurance of like, I'm here, it's okay, things are fine, I'm here for you. And then with the friend, it was more relaxed, more casual, and I think a lot of times, sometimes with friends, they are the most convincing. They're the ones who can talk us into things or out of things. And so I wanted to start off with having us face opposite directions, and then by the end of it, turn and face the same way and be on the same page, because I feel like a lot of time it's easier for friends to kind of talk to each other, and easier for them to convince them of a new idea, or not so much convince them that they're wrong, but convince them to change how they're looking at things, and convince them to change how they see things. And so starting with, facing the opposite direction, and then turning and facing the same way. And then after that, I come home, I go in bed, and one thing I want to say for all of the bed scenes, those were interesting to set up, because anytime there's like a top down shot, that was filmed with all of my bed sheets on the floor, because I can't put a tripod on the bed because it's not a stable surface, so it doesn't really work. So I had to move all my bed sheets onto the floor and then film it that way. So it was a little awkward, but it worked, and I think it looked really good. And then for the dream sequence after that, the first part of it, that location was one that I knew pretty much as soon as I knew what the scene was going to be, like, that's the location that I need, because it was perfect. We started in this tranquil garden, and then he went to this desert that was desolate and lifeless, and now he's in this kind of in between. There's this beautiful tree, there's this beautiful greenery, but there's still this desert sand that's all around him, and I feel like it's just such a good middle ground area for the character and for the story, and it just worked perfectly. There was never any question as to where that scene would take place. And then after that, at the beach, that was in San Diego, and that was one where, I was like, I called my sister and I was like, "Hey, I have this idea for a scene. I can come down. I just need a few hours to go to the beach and film something really quick. It's not gonna be anything crazy." And she was amazing. She was like, "Hey, yeah, that's totally fine." So her and her husband Luke, we all went and we filmed it, and it was perfect. And it was, yeah, it was It was an amazing day. That day was pretty crazy because it was raining a lot, and it actually rained basically from the time I got to San Diego to 30 minutes before we went to the beach. There was then a window of about, I don't know, an hour, maybe, where we were at the beach and it didn't rain. Now, it was freezing cold. It was super windy, and it was so cold. It was so, so cold, and being in that water was awful, but I was also so happy because it looked beautiful, and it was hard to be sad when looking at such a beautiful sunset and knowing that, like, I got the perfect shot to end my movie. It was, I could not be sad, and I didn't even think about the cold, or I didn't think about, anything else. It was just pure, like, bliss. Like, I'm here, we're doing the thing, and this is, there's nowhere else I'd rather be. And that was it. That was the filming of this movie. I want to thank everyone who helped me film this movie. It wouldn't have been the same without you guys. And yeah, it was a lot of work. It was a lot of just figuring things out, a lot of trial and error. But in the end, it turned out perfectly. So, with that being said, I know it's been a long video, but thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye for now.